Hi, this is Tom Needham, and you're listening to The Sounds of Film. Today, we welcome award winning writer director Ash Mayfair to discuss the powerful new film Skin of Youth, a groundbreaking love story set in the underworld of 1990s Saigon that follows a transgender sex worker and her cage fighter lover as they struggle for survival, identity, and the future they dream of building together. Ash, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me, Tom. Wow, that sounds amazing. The synopsis coming from you.
Well, it is
You
an
described
amazing
it
film, you
so
know.
well.
Um, Now, I understand that there was a long time in the coming in terms of coming up with the idea of this film. What's the origin of the story?
Yes, it's taken me, I want to say, more than 16 years since the concept first entered my life. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly the origin of the story. To give you a little bit of the background, my youngest sibling is transgender, and more than 16 years ago, when he was 2 years old, he shared this with me. um, and I there's a really big age gap between us, and I was starting my journey to become a filmmaker back then, and I was aware of the struggle, so to speak, of the trans community in Vietnam, particularly. And having heard that directly from my sibling, even though he was a child, he was very sure. He was very sure. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Look, I'm not a girl. I'm a boy." Um, so I have watched him grown over the years, and through those years, I've also tried to educate myself about the subject matter, just to walk with him on this journey. And through the process, I met a lot of young trans kids in the country. So 2018 was when I first had the thought of just noting down some of the stories that these kids would share with me. And I wasn't sure yet if, it would be a film or a documentary. It's something. Um, and yeah, it wasn't until I finished my first film and, was done with it that the image and the characters became a lot more clear to me. Um, so that's sort of the origin of the story in a nutshell. The main character, San, is very much a fabric of multiple different lives that I've met through my research and connection with the community. The actress who play her contributed a great deal to actually the writing and the rewriting of her own role in the script. I um, I met her when she was 19 years old, and she had run away from home at 16 to live in Saigon. She worked multiple jobs, many of them not particularly legal, in order to, afford a life and to begin her transition. So much of that was also brought into the film because of her.
Yeah, so you mentioned Vietnam. Tell me what is unique about this story as it applies specifically to Vietnam.
Well, so as far as I'm aware, Skin of Youth is the first fiction film to have cast an actual trans person in the leading role. There was a documentary made by an amazing filmmaker called Finding from many, many years ago, um, which has a trans person. But it was never publicly released there. So I guess in terms of the country itself, there's there's still a lot of stigma, I think, being trans. And I I grew up and I lived in Vietnam until I was 13, 14 years old. I've come back frequently since then to make both of my features. And I've seen a huge change socially, in terms of the perspective and the attitude towards the queer community, and particularly in young people. Um, However, socially and legally, there's still a lot of barriers for trans kids, to be honest.
Well, one of the things that's especially unique about this film is that there's also the whole cage fighter part of the story too. how,
Right.
how did that part come in to play?
So I had wanted to explore this kind of concept of, peeling off the skin, finding one's own identity by like transformation of the flesh, so to speak. And I knew that the main character, Zan, the trans character, would be a singer and a dancer. Um, and it just came very naturally that, her her cis male counterpart would be a martial artist, boxer, fighter. Um, I wanted, like, I think in this world, that we talk about in Skin of Youth, love and violence are very close to one another. And so much of this is the kind of like creative license that I take when we talk about the theme, and when I'm discussing the story with my cast. So the cage fighting aspect of it, some of it is fictional. A lot of it is also drawn from more like, my understanding of what the kind of the degree of passion and violence that many of these youth would subject themselves to in order to survive.
I was fascinated with the actual editing of those cage fighting scenes. It reminded me a little bit of like Raging Bull. Were
Oh
you
my God.
influenced by any other films in terms of those fight sequences?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you can't be a filmmaker studying in New York and not be influenced by Raging Bull. And I grew up, well, we when I was growing up in Vietnam, there was no cinema showing art house movies. So my film education came largely from bootleg DVDs. And as a kid, really, like 12, 13 years old, some of these films didn't even have subtitles. So like I would get those DVDs, I would watch them and just be fascinated by the moving images, and realizing now in retrospect, I was probably a bit too young,
Right.
to watch like David Fincher's work or Ang Lee's work. But I was insanely obsessed. And a lot of the visual too, I have to say, came from like my personal love for Hong Kong movies
Mm.
of the era in the 90s. In fact, the entire kind of visual language came from the admiration for like martial arts and films of that era. The music too. My composer Tân Thất An and I, we talk a lot about like Leslie Chung, or kind of music that were filtering into Vietnam through like those channels. And I also get a lot of questions as to why we set the film in the 90s. And this is the main reason. Like, that was a really interesting period culturally for the country. We had the embargo until 1990 from the US. So there wasn't a lot, and then sort of there was nothing when I was a preteen, and then suddenly overnight there was like an explosion of so much art and music and pop culture, like coming from Taiwan, from Hong Kong, and then the US. So it was a really cool period, and I think growing up, I was informed a lot by that.
I think a lot of Americans, all they really know about Vietnam is the war. Um,
Yeah.
but things have changed a lot since then, haven't they, in terms of the relationship between the two countries?
Absolutely. I think Vietnam is known when I say when I was in boarding school as, a teenager, Vietnam is known very much through textbooks, as you say. But now I'm very happy and excited to say I think the identity of the country culturally and artistically has been so vibrant, particularly in the past like 10, 12 years I've been working there. Um, I really hope though that, the in terms of the social restriction, that a lot of it will catch up soon because I see a dichotomy in a difference between the old system of governance and what the people want, especially young people, what they want, what they yearn for, and what they believe.
You are one of the leading filmmakers who's made movies there, and you've had the opportunity to show your films all over the world. Is that a great responsibility? And what is it that you're hoping to do through this film and other films that you've made?
You asked some difficult questions. Thank you, though, because let me think. Is it a great responsibility? So let me tell you a story. When I screened my first film, The Third Wife, in Brazil for the first time, I was invited to this high school, like all girls high school, after the film festival. And one of them asked me this question: when did you realize that you were a feminist? And I had to take a pause and think really deeply about that because I did not grow up thinking I'm going to fight for women's rights. It's not, a language that a child growing up in the 90s in Vietnam would be introduced to. I think by working and living and experiencing the difference in treatment that, different male and female genders, particularly in the film industry, has emphasized what I believe in. And it made me a feminist as I live and work. And, the more art I do, the stronger I believe in fighting for equality. And in a very similar manner, I think that sense of responsibility arrives gradually. It didn't happen overnight that I wanted to tell a story about marginalized communities. Um, it's funny because now in Vietnam I'm known as that queer filmmaker. Because my first film was a lesbian film. The second one is a trans story, and they both rather heavy subject matters. Um, so is there a sense of duty? Yes, I believe that as an artist, being put in a place where I'm capable of bringing these kind of stories to light and making them beautiful and creating work of art out of them that is inspiring for people, um, I take it as a sacred duty, as a very sacred responsibility, and I take it very seriously. What do I hope to get out of it? So many things. But at the end of the day, I make films like this for kids like my sibling. I make films like this for kids like my Caz. And I wanted to put them on the big screen. I wanted to share their story. And even if just one queer kid out there get to see the film and get to feel that they are not alone, that's enough for me.
That's great. So your subject matter has been discussed, but let's talk about your filmmaking. You've made several films and you keep on evolving. Tell me about this film. What are you most proud of in terms of what you accomplished filmmaking wise?
So, are you asking more about like the technical aspect of it or my process, or can you give me a bit more?
Yeah, in terms of the filmmaking process and your skill as a director.
I see. Okay. Um, God, it's a world of difference actually, Skin of Youth compared to my first project. My For the third wife, I was a baby. I didn't know anything. I was so innocent. I just like ran in there and picked the most difficult location in the hardest mountain, and we went. Um, this one, it was different in so many ways. But I had the same team, and the collaborators really, helped the project take flight in so many ways. So I think as a director, I was able to be more confident and more open-hearted. Um, so I'll give you an example. When we started rehearsing with the cast, and I would sit down with them and share the script. Like so many of my cast members who were just kids, and majority of them were non-actors. They would say things like, "Oh, I don't know, Ash. This sound weird. We don't talk like this. let's
Right.
let's change the dialogue." um, and I think I was able to allow so much of that freedom to happen that the cast and crew really trusted me. That is my proudest achievement. This film was truly a labor of love from everyone involved, and it's exceeded my expectation really in so many ways. It's really hard. It was really hard to do in a totally different way compared to my first project, but I felt safer because my team was stronger.
That's so interesting because I know in Hollywood, that's a real no-no sometimes for actors to say, "Oh, can I change this line?" Some directors go crazy over that, and it's considered. I mean, some directors do it for sure, but others think it's unprofessional or it can, slow things down. Um, but the fact that you allowed that and even encouraged it is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and they thank you. Which is why I'm really happy that I took the chance and took the leave, because I knew that I would be working with so many non-actors. And I knew that earning the trust is the only way that I can get any kind of authentic performance. Um, so it was a really fortunate collaboration with my cast and my crew too, because there are so many of the ideas visually and auditorily would come from my team, and it would be like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. We got to try that. So yeah, this was a really beloved project.
Just to go back to something you said earlier, you said something along the lines of as you make movies more and more, you've grown to become a feminist. What is it about making movies that would make somebody become a feminist?
So I can't speak on behalf of, anyone else except myself, but I can share that because I'm naturally drawn to story of marginalized community. And in filmmaking, women are still very much marginalized. Um, Women are creating amazing work, in the US and internationally, but we get far fewer directing assignments, particularly with big budget studio projects. And when we do, our salaries are not as high. So naturally, I think it's just something that's so clear in my day-to-day understanding of the industry. So that's, in terms of work, in terms of like everything else to do with personal life. Um, it's also something I think filmmaking forces me to reflect upon what I created and how that may inform the perspective of a young person. Um, I now am very, very aware when I write, a female or a female-oriented character, how that may be perceived by other young people. And this is not self-censorship in any way, but I think there's so many beautiful stories out there about womanhood, about motherhood, about the female identity, that deserves to be handled with intelligence and care. And that too is part of being a feminist. That too is part of the celebration of femininity that has gone, unacknowledged for so many years.
Ash, you're known for your films about Vietnam and marginalized subjects. Are there other stories you want to tell too? Or have you found your niche and there's a zillion stories that you can continue to tell that are different but still connect to these settings and subjects?
I know for sure that if I keep making movies in the future, anything that I make will have incredibly complex women at the heart of it. Um, and this is something that, endlessly fascinates me. So yeah, if I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. Well, Ash, I really appreciate you coming on the show. You have such an amazing career, and I can't wait to see what you do next. I hope everyone gets an opportunity to see Skin of Youth. Can you direct people anywhere online so that they can learn more about your work in this film, Skin of Youth?
Sure, yes. Skin of Youth will be available June 26th, I believe, on Film Movement Plus platform as part of their kind of Pride Month offering. So I hope it will get to reach an audience out there and then everyone will enjoy it.
Well, thank you again, Ash. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much, Tom.